How's it going, folks? Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me today. So I'm delighted to launch this new feature on the channel over the next couple of weeks as Celtic go into the final 5 games of the season. It is the road to the title. So over the next couple of weeks, people from Celtic pods across the country and in Scotland and all over the world are going to join me on the channel as we look ahead to each game. So we've got Hamish from 67 Hail, Ryan 118, the guys from Gig Pod are going to join me as well as we build up to the title. Hopefully it will be the title for Celtic. On today's episode, we're going to be looking ahead to the Ross County game. And to do so, I'm delighted to be joined by Tino from the Celtic Exchange as we look ahead to the first game post-split. Tino, thanks very much for joining me.
You're welcome, Enda. Good to be here. Looking forward to it.
It's been a weird season. It's been a long season. I mean, compared to last year, now last year felt longer, I feel like, just because it was almost begging for it to end. This year has been a roller coaster. I think that's what everyone told us it was going to be like with Ange Postecoglou. But to be sitting here post-split, heading into this last 6 fixtures of the season on the way to a title, I don't think you would have batted your eyelids at that at the start of the season. I don't think many people expected Celtic to be 6 points clear at this point in the season. So your general thoughts on the last couple of weeks and even the last season as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've spoken on our show and, we talked pre-season or when Ange arrived about the fact that we thought that even just competing, challenging at some stage in this season, keeping it going after Christmas and giving us something to play for coming into, April and May time would have been a huge plus, a huge, uplift on what we've done last year. We've gone way ahead of that. As you quoted, we're 6 points clear, 5 games to go post-split. And I think it's just such a pleasant surprise. If we're being really honest, none of us had a clue about Ange, who he was, what he'd done. And, we're quick enough to jump on Wikipedia and check his stats. But until he arrived and started to make his moves, you just didn't know what to expect. You then go into that first league game of the season, 2-1 against Hearts. You then lose at Livy, you lose at Ibrox, and you're thinking this is going to be a long old road. But very quickly, something started to click. It's clear the players were getting on board with the message early, and we've seen a very, very quick uplift. And obviously up until the weekend there, you're in a 33-game unbeaten domestic streak. So a real pleasant surprise of a season. But now we are where we are. The targets have changed, and it's absolutely our league to go and take care of and get over the line on in the next few weeks.
That's a very interesting point you made there about the targets changing, because I remember at the start of the season I said if Celtic won the double of the League Cup and the Scottish Cup but didn't win the league, like, is that a success for this season? Potentially it might be. But as you move forward under Ange, the mood has changed so much around Celtic and the fans and our expectations of what we expect from this pretty much brand new team. It's very funny how quickly it changes and how our perceptions of what we expect from these players have changed. Because if you look at the weekend, for example, the reaction after that, where we've come to expect such good performances, it was such a disappointment. But if you actually look at it as a bigger picture thing, nobody expected to be there in the first place.
Yeah, that's it. And, as football fans, we can all get bogged down in the kind of the myopic nature of, a cup semi-final. And there's no getting away from the fact that Sunday was, a real sore one. It was tough to take. And, I was at the game and a few of the guys from our show were there as well. And it's hard to deal with. But when you take a step back, it's a wee bit less painful on Monday, less so Tuesday. I'm over it now, Wednesday as we record. And you look at that bigger picture and say, well, if somebody told you start of the season, League Cup in the bag, 6 points clear, 5 games to go to reclaim the league title, you would accept losing a Scottish Cup semi-final all day long. So, yeah, it's where we find ourselves. And painful as the weekend was, I'm more than happy to be here.
So you were there. How was Bobby Madden in the flesh?
As horrendous as I'm sure he must have been on the telly. We record our show on a Monday. So Monday night, myself, James and Paddy from our show covered Bobby Madden's display in some detail. And very generally, we're not a podcast that, labours on referees and conspiracy theories and paranoia. I was laughing because I joked with my dad before the game. I was there with James, who's my brother, and my dad. And my dad was saying that Madden was his only concern about Sunday. And I was saying, listen, don't worry about it. He's a bad ref, but he's not a cheat. He shouldn't be an issue. And I couldn't have been more wrong. I've watched your own reaction to the show, and whilst I don't think Madden directly impacted the game, he didn't chop a Celtic goal off, he didn't red card any of our players or any of those things, but his micromanagement of the game, the small things that he done to break up play, the non-booking of John Lundstrom blows my mind. Aribo and Bassey, the hard work they had to do to get a yellow card. He didn't directly impact the game, but he played a huge part in not allowing Celtic to play their football. You made the point, I think, that it's not Rangers players' fault. They're set out to do a job, and if Van Bronckhorst tells them to be aggressive and maybe leave a marker, on one of their players, that's them following instruction. It's then the referee's job to go and deal with that. And I just think Bobby Madden let so many things go. I have heard a rumour that Madden's retiring at the end of the season or moving on to pastures new or whatever it might be, and that this may well have been his last Celtic Rangers game. And if so, how he acted maybe makes a lot more sense for me.
Yeah. I mean, I always stand by the point of that you should always play as good as you can to avoid those refereeing decisions having an impact on the game. You know what I mean? If you play good enough to win the game, you probably will win the game unless there's a crazy penalty or something like that. I don't think the referees have that much of an impact on proceedings. But Celtic, the reality is Celtic just didn't play well enough, and because of that, the way that Rangers were allowed to play by Bobby Madden did have an impact because Celtic just weren't good enough to break down or come up with something new. Yeah. They just recently enough, over the last 24 hours or so, VAR was voted through. Seems to be coming through midway through the next season because of the World Cup, because of how things are falling with Qatar. Now, I am a strong advocate against VAR. I've seen what happened. I was strongly for it now before it came into the Premier League, but since I've seen it in the Premier League, I've just seen bad decisions still being made by referees who are getting to watch it over and over again and still coming to the same conclusion. And the impact that it has on fans in the stadium and the viewer just watching what it does to the game, the highs of a 90th minute winner. You don't know whether you can celebrate it anymore.
Yeah.
What's your general thoughts on VAR coming into Scotland?
Do you know, I've definitely got mixed thoughts on it. I think VR, like any technology, it's only as good as those who are implementing that technology. And if some of the refereeing in this country is anything to go by, that's not going to be a good thing. I think at the end of the day, like a refereeing decision on the park, it's going to be down to some individual's interpretation of what's going on there. So whilst you might have three guys in a VAR studio or a VAR room or however it will work, you still get three guys who can potentially get it wrong. And sometimes we'll sit on our show, three of us on our show, I know there's three guys on your show, and we'll sit and disagree on decisions after the weekend. So I just don't know how it plays out. My general feeling just now is that Scotland should make more of a point of, first and foremost, getting referees full time. I think as much as, we'll talk about Bobby Madden after the weekend, he's not the only one who continues to make seriously poor decisions every week. And actually, to an extent, you kind of can't blame them because they're part-time referees. They're amateur in status. They'll get paid decent fees per game, but they've got a Monday to Friday job as well. They're not allowed to focus their time to this profession. And I do feel that if we made the effort to, first and foremost, at least make the Premier League referees, full-time, then that would instantly see an upturn in their performance. And I think that would be more a priority for me ahead of VAR. But as you say, VAR's been voted in. It will come in at the strange time of midway through a season. And I think it could be bedlam. I think in Scotland it could go really kind of haywire. So we'll need to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, we've certainly seen a sort of a betting in period for sure in the Premier League. I think it's gotten a little bit better, but the first 3 months were chaos in the Premier League. Yeah. So you can only imagine what they're going to be like in the SPFL. So without laboring the point on VAR and referees, we'll get into the point of the show, and that is to sort of maybe take a look back at the season first of all, and the memories of this season, and then look ahead to, you're going to do the Ross County game for us. So what we're going to do on the show is basically going to have a guest on, and we're going to look back at our season, pick our player of the year, pick our favorite memory for the year, and then look ahead to the game that's coming up. So Ross County this weekend. We'll get into that a little bit later on, but we'll start with Ange Postecoglou and how big of an impact he's had at the club. It's been said a lot. It's almost to the point now where it's almost peaking to the point where people are saying how big of an impact he's had on the club. But talk us through your season in terms of preseason, him coming in, your general thoughts when you started to turn and maybe think that there might be something special happening here.
Yeah, I mean, you say started to turn. So without knowing much or anything about Ange, as soon as he was announced, I was fully supportive of him. And generally speaking, that would just be my take on whoever's managing Celtic Football Club. You give the guy your full backing until it's clearly run its course. And I think Ange has expressed that himself. He's basically said that from day one, the vast majority of folk got on board and were very supportive. There's still a couple of guys who are, digging deep and saying, Ange isn't the man. And that's fine. It's opinion stuff and people are entitled to that. But by and large, people see what Ange is trying to do. And I think just there's so many things he's done so well. First and foremost, I think recruitment is the absolute biggest thing that he's done, because ultimately you can have a style of play and an intention of playing in a certain way, but if you don't have the guys to do it, then it just doesn't work. I think Sean Maloney's just come a cropper of that. Sean Maloney wanted to play in a certain way. You can't do it if you don't have the players, and I think he's come a cropper as a result. Ange clearly identified the players he needed in certain key positions, and we can run through them all. There's so many guys who have been so pivotal, from the goalie first and foremost, through Carter Vickers, who's been an ever-present, and Starfelt alongside him. Callum McGregor's found new levels, so as much as he wasn't a new signing, he's certainly stepped up into this captain's role. And then if we're keeping going with this spine of the team, right up to Kygore, who's been the talisman, certainly for the first part of the season. So there's so many guys that have come in. I think it's 15 guys over 2 transfer windows. And by and large, there's 1 or 2 who haven't quite worked out. You would bring James McCarthy into that. You'd bring Liam Scales into that. The 2 lads from Sheffield Wednesday, Urogide and Liam Shaw, you would argue they're not Ange signings, but they haven't, they've obviously gone out on loan. But that aside, there's maybe 11 players aside from them who have all had a serious impact on the season. And I think that's so impressive. Beyond that, there's one thing signing players. The other thing is bringing them into your system and introducing them to your dressing room and making sure they gel with the other players. I think, again, Callum McGregor's had a huge part to play in doing that. But I think the fact that Ange has A, signed the players, and then B, got them for the most part to hit the ground running, that's been so impressive. The other key facet, I would say, is how he's handled the press here in Scotland. You've seen many a Celtic and Rangers manager fall foul, basically because they're just, maybe just not strong enough as a character. You've seen from his first few interviews that wasn't going to be the case with Ange. And I think, he bats away the questions which, should be batted away, but he'll also deal with the hard ones. He won't shy away from a question. And I think it's almost to a point where he becomes more and more impressive every time he speaks. So there's a lot to unpack when it comes to Ange and what he's done, but all in all, just so impressive as a character.
Yeah, the character aspect is a very interesting one, because I think that's what I've been most impressed with. As good as his tactics has been, as good as the team has been, his personality is something that really has blown me away, because he's such a strong personality without being an alpha male dominating sort of personality. He's strong enough to the press. His handling of the press has been a ballsy one, I would say, because we all know what the Scottish press is like at the best of times. If you go up against them, you're definitely making a rod for your own back if things don't go well. But I guess he had the belief in his own ability and the belief in what he was doing, that he knew that, they're probably going to criticize him regardless. So he may as well, bat away the stupid questions. Because I think the point was made on an interview with Hamish on 67 Hill. He interviewed the autobiographer of Ange's book. I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
And he said that, Ange will give you a good answer if you give him a good question. And I think that has been the case. He's not ignorant towards the press. If you don't give him a stupid question, he won't give you a stupid answer.
I think so. I think there's a couple of journalists who have been caught in his kind of crosshairs, early bells, and he's given them short shrift. I think I think, like anybody, you get asked a silly question, you should get replied to with a silly answer. And he puts those ones to bed very early, but he will also be very respectful of, as I say, tough, challenging and important questions. He was asked early bells, you had a situation where there was some racial abuse towards Kygore. We've seen it, different video footage doing the rounds. And he was asked about, the question of racism in Scottish football in the bigger picture. And that's a delicate question. You've got to be very careful how you answer that. But he answered it like he's answered every question in the right way. And it just goes back to the human element of it. This isn't a football thing. This is a societal thing. And, people behaving in such a way really need to take a good look at themselves and how they're behaving. And he just dealt with that in a very humane way, as he does with everything. And I think a big part of why he resonates so well with the Celtic support is the whole immigrant background that he himself has. So, as a young man or as a young family moving from Greece to Australia to set up a new life. And that's essentially what so many people in Celtic's early days, Celtic were obviously founded by, Brother Walfred, coming from your part of the world, over in Ireland. And there's so many Irish immigrants who have made their way and made their life here in Scotland, my own family being one of them. So that, that similarity that he has in terms of finding a new life in a new country, and how he speaks about it and how, dignified he is about things like that. It's so important. And, at times Celtic's about so much more than football, and Ange gets that. And I think that's why, so many fans are on board with him.
I think it's brilliant how both of us and many other Celtic fans will say they didn't know anything about this guy when he was first announced. And now we know his entire background, his life, his coaching career, everything about him. We pretty much know that he's allowed it to be out there anyway. But you mentioned a couple of transfers. Who do you think is the top transfer of the season in terms of impact, the quality they brought to the position that they're in, the upgrade that they've made? There's a good few players that you could put into this, but if you were to put on the spot with one.
Yeah, I think there's at least half a dozen you could put in easily. And I talked about that spine of the team and the importance of having a strong goalkeeper, a strong centre half. But for me, it's Kygore. Despite the fact they missed 3 months or so through injury, I think again we've spoken on our show about the fact that yes, so many guys have played their part, but were it not for Kyogo's goals, I think he gets 16 goals before getting injured. If it weren't for his goals, we wouldn't have been where we are. He played such a key part in kind of dragging us through that first half of the season. Least of all winning us the League Cup final with 2 brilliant goals as well after we went 1-0 down. So I think overall, what he's brought in terms of goals, energy, his humility, how he is as a guy as well. And I think he's just played such an important part, in this team. And I think for Celtic as well, we've always had a talisman, in some way, shape or form. It's, it's what you look forward to as a fan. And whether that's a guy like Edouard or Dembele or Moravchik or Larsson or whoever. And I think right now it's Kygore. So for me, he's definitely the star man.
Yeah, you almost forget how good he is because he's been out for so long, because so much has happened that it's almost, there's 2 parts of the season. It's, the points where we had Kygore, the points where we didn't. And I guess in terms of the talismanic element of it, he is definitely one of the leaders within the side, but I think it's a different sort of leadership to what we would have seen with Larsson, for example, because even though Larsson was he was the best of a very, very good group of players, he stood out and he was the main man and everyone sort of knew about him. Whereas I think Kygore is still fairly under the radar outside of Scotland. I don't think many people would have seen what he's doing or even paid much attention to him. But here, I think this is a guy that is like almost a generational talent in terms of what Celtic are going to get.
Yeah, and I think we're also getting him, getting into his peak years. I think he got a 4-year deal. I think he's around about 26 years of age. So we've already seen some brilliance from him. He struggled on Sunday. There's no doubt he's still short of match fitness, and it will remain to be seen. We'll maybe cover it shortly about what part he'll play against Ross County. But there's no doubt when he's at his best and, fully fit and firing, he's a phenomenal talent. And I think it's so exciting for Celtic and Ange specifically to have unearthed such a talent. I think as well it's important to note that the board are clearly backing Ange because he's gone to Japan to sign Kygore for, I think, 4.6 million, something like that. So it's not insignificant as an outlay. And then not long after, he's then gone and picked up Maeda, Ideguchi and Hatate. And the board have fully trusted him to do so. So this isn't somebody that the scouting department have identified and spent 6 months or 12 months looking at. And she said, I want these guys and I need you to back me. And I think it's clear that the board are backing him. And that could be exciting getting into the summer, because if his track record so far of signing guys for Celtic is impressive, then give him another window in summer and we could really see some exciting talents.
Big time. It'll be, I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see what happens next season. If this is Ange 1.0 with the very beginning of the rebuild, I'm very excited to see what the next steps are in terms of who bringing in. Because, I mean, at the start of the season, you were looking at the team and you were thinking, God, we need maybe 3 more midfielders, another striker. And now we're debating who is going to be in the starting lineup, because our backups, I know there's a couple of weaknesses, obviously at fullback. We saw the drop in talent compared to our first team, but in terms of the Matt O'Reilly versus Tom Rogic debate, or Jota versus Abada debate, or who's playing up front or who's playing as the striker. I mean, we do have strength and depth, and this is just his first 2 transfer windows. So the next 2, it'll be very interesting to see where he brings us. In terms of those transfer windows, where do you think Celtic need to improve on?
I think, as you touched on yourself, Enda, I think we're light in the fullback areas. I think Greg Taylor stepped up, and listen, all credit to him, because everybody to man was saying we must improve at left back. I think Taylor's really increased his levels in the last few weeks alone, and he's shown that he could and should potentially be our left back. There is a bigger question if we're looking to progress in Europe, if he's good enough for that step up, and that remains to be seen, because he was poor against Bodo Glimt, and I think a lot of people jumped on the bandwagon at that time to say, he's just not good enough. I'm not sure. He's still a young man, and I think Ange has proven that guys can and will improve under him. Tony Ralston's your best example of that. Even McGregor's picked up his levels. Tom Rogic has rediscovered some form. So even existing guys who we know all about have gone up a notch under Ange. But I would say in the fullback areas, because, there's no doubt that amongst other factors, when we lost Juranovic first and then Taylor on Sunday, I don't want to quite say it changed the game, but I think it had a significant impact on the remainder of the tie at that point. So had we more in reserve, then we might have got away with that. Liam Scales is a funny one, because I don't think he's featured since the Bodo game as well. I think he maybe played the first one and he's not featured since. And that's interesting, because he was around the fringes of the squad, and now it seems that potentially Ange has decided that he's not suitable. So that'll be interesting in terms of whether he gets in the market and finds maybe a first choice left back, if not somebody to back up Taylor.
Yeah, because Taylor's such a sensitive topic for a lot of Celtic fans, because again, you do have such veracity in the argument that if you say that you don't think Greg Taylor's good enough for Europe, people almost act as if you're shooting Greg Taylor in the heart. Whereas, I mean, I don't think any of us want to do that, or any of us want to, criticize Greg Taylor beyond what is fair and balanced criticism, or just wanting the best for Celtic. I'd be on the boat that, I think Greg Taylor's an absolutely fine left back, and he does good jobs, and he has improved, definitely has improved since last season. And he's perfectly fine against teams like Ross County, Hearts, even Rangers to a certain extent. But I do think we need that step up. It's like if you look at Ralston versus Juranovic, Juranovic isn't that far ahead of Ralston, but that tiny bit is what you would say you would favour him over Ralston at right back for a European game. It's just little small margins that you're looking to improve on.
Of course it is, and I think you're spot on with what you're saying. I think everyone's been delighted with Ralston, but I also think that when push comes to shove, and a game as important as the weekend there, for example, when Ange decides to start Juranovic over Ralston, it's the right call. He's the Croatian international right back. He's a quality, experienced player. Tony Ralston has, impressed so many of us, and he's still got a way to go. He'll continue to improve, but I think when push comes to shove, Juranovic is at that level where Ralston hasn't quite reached. He may reach it at some point, and Taylor also hasn't reached it, if we're being frank about it. So those lads I've mentioned have done well, but I think if we want to be top level, and if we want to look beyond, Scottish football, and Ange's, talked repetitively about the importance of benchmarking yourself against the best of the best in Europe, he wants to see us, do well in these big competitions, and he won't rest up on guys that are good enough for Scotland, but not good enough to take it to the next level. So I'm sure we'll see upgrades in those positions and potentially elsewhere. I still think we might be a striker light and maybe a winger. There's the burning question about James Forrest and where he's at in his career at this moment in time. I've got huge admiration and respect for what James has done for Celtic to date, but he's struggling. There's no other way to put it. And Sunday, he definitely struggled. He's been unlucky with injury. He's come in and out the side. He missed the last couple of weeks and then come back in for Sunday. And as a 30-year-old winger, those injuries can catch up on you. So, listen, I'd love nothing more than James to rediscover his form in the way that Tom Rogic has, but I'm not sure if he will. And at that point, you might need another winger to provide competition as well.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's listened to the Huddle breakdown with us knows that I'm not a stats man. I'm very much the odd one out in the podcast. But
yeah,
the guys, Alan Morrison highlighted this at the start of the season, that if you look at world football as a whole over the last 10, 15 years, wingers are good, and then just fall off a cliff in terms of what they can do. And James Forrest, unfortunately, looks like he's going towards that, or he's might even be just over his peak of where he can get to. So I guess before we move on to the Ross County game, there's been loads of big moments. Anthony Ralston has had a couple of them himself this season. Is there one that stands out to you if Celtic want to win this title that you think that's my favorite moment of the season?
Yeah. I was having a think about it before coming on. That there's a number of them, as you say. There's a big one against Rangers in February. The 3-0 in the full Celtic Park. Full of Celtic fans. That was a big one. The League Cup final I've mentioned with Kygore. The Kygore goal against Ferencváros at home after the Jota pass. Just a brilliant moment. But for me, the big moment was Abada's late winner against Dundee United. 90th minute, nothing each. Looked like we'd blown it. I think if I'm right, that we had the chance to go top if we got the win. Rangers had dropped points at Ross County that weekend, I think. I'll need to check that. I think they drew 3 each with Ross County. And it was just such a moment. The energy that buzzed around the stadium when he scored. You've seen the famous image of, Jota and the crowd, King of Glasgow and all that kind of stuff. I was there with, James I've mentioned and my dad, and it was just a brilliant moment. And it was kind of a moment where you thought, this could be our year. It was just, it felt like more than just a goal. There was a bigger picture there, and the belief that it gave the players and the belief that it definitely gave the support that this might be something special. So for me, that to date is the most important moment of this season. I'm
not going to reveal mine just yet, but you're very close to it, because the Jota celebration in the fans, it was there was a couple of moments this season that I've felt a little bit emotional when I was watching it happen, just weirdly emotional for some weird, strange reason, but that was definitely one of them. So it's one of the highlights for me for sure. So there are games to come before we clinch the title. The title is not clinched just yet. It's very much in our own hands. 6 points clear with 5 games to go. Ross County is the first one up. Interesting enough, now this was from Stevie on the on Gig Pod, who tweeted this earlier, that Ross County, since Celtic's win away, late last minute winner, I think Anthony Ralston might have got that winner as well. Since that, Ross County have not lost a game away, at home. So that was back in December. They are very much a side that are in decent enough form, much better form than they were in when we last played them, but they're one of the weird teams that in the post-split situation don't really have much to play for. So it's an odd sort of fixture to start off this with.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, I think they've got Europe to play for. I think they're in this kind of mini kind of thing with Motherwell and Dundee United. The 4th place position does get a chance at Europe. So Hearts have got 3rd place sewn up, and I think it's between Ross County, Motherwell and Dundee United for who gets that 4th spot. There's only a point that separates the 3 teams there. So they'll be motivated, all right. You're absolutely spot on with what you say. In the 7 home league games since Tony Ralston beat them with his 96-minute header, I think they've won 3 and drawn 4, including that 3 Strawberry Rangers. So they'll be confident at home. I think the huge bonus for them was a couple of weeks ago in terms of securing top 6. And listen, good for them. They've got a limited budget, one of the lowest budgets in the league. And they may, to an extent, feel their season's work is already done. finishing anywhere in the top 6 is a huge bonus. But I think when it comes to it, come Sunday, I think it's a 2:30 kickoff, they'll be fired up for it. Malky Mackay has maybe surprised quite a lot of folk, particularly with how they started the season. But they're in good shape just now. They're playing good football. They've got one of the league's top scorers, and is it Charles Regan-Cook is the striker? He's a good player, and he could be a threat to anybody at any time. We know they can be physical. Carl Starfelt will tell you that after getting his nose burst last time out. So it'll be a tough game, and Celtic are on the back of a poor result, and their first poor result in a long time domestically. And that could go one or two ways. Celtic could go up there really fired up, really motivated to prove that Sunday was just a blip. Or they could go up there a wee bit nervous, a wee bit apprehensive. I think it'll be the former. I think with Ange leading the way and the messages he'll be giving the players this week and right up until Sunday, I think they'll absolutely be on it on Sunday, and I'm quietly confident we'll go and get a really solid result.
Yeah, I was over at the last Ross County game in Celtic Park where there was an early red card, and Celtic really went on to dominate the game. Giakoumakis got a hat-trick that day, and it wasn't really a contest after the red card. Celtic were very, very much in control of that game. As long as there's not a red card in this game early on like that, I don't think it'll be as easy. I think it'll be a little bit more difficult, especially with Ross County at home. They might be a little bit more tight, and even just look for a draw, even if not getting a win. They might try shut up shop. Without Giakoumakis, if he's not going to be there, let's just pretend he's not. He may or may not be here, depending on how the training went over the last week or so. It didn't seem like a major injury, but like Kygore at the weekend, he might not just be 100% there. So in terms of the Celtic starting lineup, do you think Kygore's going to come back into the starting lineup as the forward, or how do you think Celtic are going to change things from the loss?
Yeah, I think he has to start. I think he should have started on Sunday, if I'm being honest. I think we should always have a number 9 on the park, and I think Maeda's not that guy. Maeda's so effective for Celtic, but so effective when he comes in off the left-hand side. I'd have much rather seen him up against Tavernier on the weekend and Jota up against Bassey, but we changed the system, and that's fine, and Ange obviously had his reasons for doing so. I think you start with a number 9, and I think that's what he'll do. Despite the fact that Kyogo's definitely not at his best, he'll have another week's training under his belt, and I think he should very much start as the main striker for us up top at Ross County. Yeah, Giakoumakis, it remains to be seen if he'll be fit. The suggestions are that he may be, but again, he would likely start on the bench if he makes the squad at all. So Kyogo up top all day long for me. You've then got the question about who's behind them in the midfield supplying the firepower, and that's maybe a tougher question to answer. Yeah,
so are you a Matt O'Reilly or Tom Rogic man?
Very fond of them both, I have to say. They're the kind of guys that you watch football for. They're very enjoyable to watch. I know Tom Rogic was off the boil on Sunday and not at his best, but if you've been manhandled every time you get the ball and the ref continues to allow that, it's very hard to play your game. His game is played on the half turn, and he couldn't get that turn without getting wrestled to the ground and then getting fouls given against him for that, same type of incident.
That was insane.
So I wouldn't be against Tom Rogic starting. I think he's been so important this season. He's played, some real, he's had some real big moments, particularly around about December time and into January. He was pivotal. So I'd be happy enough with Tom Rogic back in the starting lineup. I thought O'Reilly came on and made an initial impact on Sunday and then maybe faded out. I don't know if he took a knock or whatever. I think the burning question beyond that, though, is whether Rio Hatate starts, because you may have seen the quotes today doing the rounds.
Yeah, very interesting stuff, yeah.
So Dan Orlovitz, who I think is the Japan Times, he's been quoting, different things that Rio's been saying to the press back home. And amongst other things, I think he said he's fatigued emotionally and physically, and a lot of that can be taken out of context, and, it depends how good your Japanese is, but basically it sounds like he is tired, and it's no surprise. He's rerouted his life to halfway around the world. He's travelled back and forward for international stuff. He's already played a full season, and I think anybody watched him can see that the boy's tired. He's 24 years of age, and I think he needs a break. I was surprised again that Ange didn't take him out sooner at the weekend. I thought after 70 minutes it was time to change it, and he played a lot longer than he maybe should have. I think he's the main one that's due a rest at the weekend. Everyone's banging the drum for Nir Beaton. I'm a bit mixed on their Beaton. You know, so many people. You mentioned Stevie from Gigpod. I know Stevie's a big fan and wants to see him play. I'm not convinced. I don't know if Beaton's one of those guys who, the longer he spends out the team, the better player he becomes in some people's minds. Although he has done well at times this season. But there is a suggestion that maybe he comes in. Maybe Gucci comes in. You know, Gucci has been signed for a reason. Should he maybe come in and play that anchor role and allow McGregor to play further forward, either with a Rogic or an O'Reilly? So that might be the move. But it's a tough one, and it'll be interesting to see what Ange goes for.
Yeah, the Hatate one, I think anybody who watched him over the last couple of weeks can see somebody who is emotionally tired. He does look just completely jaded at times out there. And, you know, he had such a quick start that everyone had so much high expectations for him that maybe he's disappointed over the last couple of weeks. But I guess that's somewhat of an explainer for it. David Turnbull could also come into this game. And if you look at Celtic's team before Christmas, obviously we were without Maeda, we were without O'Reilly, but the team that, you know, had the good run before Christmas was McGregor, Turnbull, Rogic, and Kygore as a number 9. So if that happens to be the team, that is a team that has won games a lot this season as well.
Huge fan of David Turnbull. Again, we had this debate just on our show this week, so I'd be more than happy to see him back in the starting lineup. Ange is a huge fan. I think Ange played him in something like 33 games before his injury. He chipped in with maybe 9 goals during that time. I think he's a serious young talent, and I'd be really pleased to see him back in. Some of the other boys aren't as convinced. James and Paddy on our show debated whether he's going to be good enough in the longer term for Celtic. And my point was, I think he's only 22 years of age. He missed a year of his career through injury. And first and foremost, the character he showed to get back from that injury and then, you know, secure the big move to Celtic says a lot for him as a guy. And I just think there's so much more to come from David Turnbull, and we've yet to see the best from him. If he's fit and fully fit and ready to go, and that'll be a call for Ange and the sports science guys to make, he's definitely a guy who should feature heavily in the last 5 games. He may not quite be there physically at the moment, I'm not sure, so they may be careful with him. But if he's deemed fit enough to start on Sunday and that they give him the nod, I'd be really pleased to see that.
I think it might be an oversimplistic way of looking at it, but his long range shooting, I always feel like it gives the opposition something else to think about, because especially like sides like Ross County and other sides, there's obviously they're going to play a little bit more defensive against Celtic. You don't blame them for doing so. But if you've got David Turnbull there taking shots from outside the box and them going on target, challenging the keeper, that might actually pull the defense out a little bit just to close them down, and that opens up space for the forward lines to get in behind as well. So he brings something different to what we have.
I think so, and I think you're right. It's always good to have that option of someone that can shoot from range, because as much as you'd love to play the traditional Barcelona way and tiki-taka your way into cutbacks and tap-ins from a few yards, it's not how football works, and it's not how it works away from home for Celtic here in Scotland. And at times you may have to resort to shooting from distance. And I think Turnbull's one of the best in the team at doing so. I think Hatate has also proven he's got a goal from range as well. But Turnbull's probably the best, shooter from outside the box. Callum McGregor doesn't seem to have that in his locker, generally speaking. Some of his shooting's been pretty wayward this season. And I'd like to think if we're struggling to break Ross County down, a guy like Turnbull, either from open play or from a set piece, is definitely a guy that's capable of getting something from outside the box.
Yeah, as long as it's not Ryan Christie doing the shooting from outside of the box, I'm absolutely fine with it.
Yeah, that lad will find himself in the Premier League next year, and that'll be interesting for him. But yeah, his shooting went downhill at a dramatic rate, unfortunately.
So I guess as we begin to wrap this up, your prediction for this weekend: are Celtic going to get back to winning ways? I should say, continue winning ways in the league.
I'm confident that Ange will have them in the right frame of mind, and he'll have them, fully focused and in a good shape, and he'll block out all the noise, because I've got to be honest with you, I think some of the overreaction in Celtic cyberspace has been incredible, these last few days, and people seem to forget, the 33 game unbeaten run, and the fact that this is a whole new team. We're still unbeaten in the league, since September, and I think you need to give the team huge credit and respect for that. But I think Ange doesn't allow that noise to get through to the players too much. I think he keeps, the focus within the dressing room. And I'm sure with his experience, he'll know the right things to say. He'll know the right way to prep, and in these next few days coming up to Sunday. and I'm confident we'll go and get the win. In terms of a scoreline, if you're asking for that, I'd like to think first and foremost we can close the door at the back. I think we've really stepped up our defensive performances this year. It will be a question mark of whether Taylor and Juranovic are fit, so that's a question. But I'd like to think we can get up there and keep a clean sheet, and I would go for something along the lines of 2-0 on Sunday.
Okay. And if Celtic win the league, I didn't prep you with this question, so it's off the cuff. If Celtic win the league, what's your celebratory drink?
I'm actually off the drink at the moment. I've taken a sabbatical since the turn of the year. But when push comes to shove, I like a Magners.
It can be Coke either. It can be Coke either.
I'll have a Magners on you once we win the league, Enda.
Yeah, good stuff. Tino, if people want to get your podcast, the Celtic Exchange, where can they get it?
Yeah, so CelticExchange.com is our website. All the links are there. We're in all the obvious places for podcasts. We're also on YouTube these days. So yeah, simply search the Celtic Exchange or the CelticExchange.com.
Yeah, I'll put a link into the podcast description as well if people want to find them. Tino, absolute pleasure. Hope you enjoy the game and enjoy the rest of the season.
Nice one, Enda. Thanks for that, and I'll speak to you soon.